Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Nice to meet you, Prabhu.
Want to check your audio, Prabhu?
Does it sound okay?
Little low.
Let me see what I can do. Yeah. Let's see. We'll check this. I'm having internet trouble, so I'm connecting by a phone line. Is that better now?
Voice is very clear, but volume is low. That's all.
Oh, boy, I don't know what I can do.
Maybe you have to speak little louder. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do the best I can. Let's see. If it doesn't work, you can let me know.
No, I will interfere if we are not able to hear or something like that.
Yeah.
If I don't interfere, then you can assume that we are hearing you properly.
Okay, and I'll try to speak loudly. We had a storm and my internet became disrupted. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, your video is coming properly. I was wondering, I thought your video may not stream, though it is a little bit.
Yeah, and it may go down, but at least the sound should work.
Yeah.
And in our movement, the most important thing is sound. Let's see.
So we are waiting for devotees to join. It will take normally 5 minutes.
Okay, how many will join?
So normally 60-70 families join.
Okay.
Here
And how many on some on YouTube and some on Zoom?
Here 60 and there some 40 families. That is a normal trend.
Okay. And tell me about yourself. What do you do?
Me?
Yes, you.
Nothing much, bro. What is there for me to? Why I'm not a person to be known much.
But tell me something about you.
I do a lot of service for a bureau, Iskcon, Indian governing body, which is more or less.
Okay.
So I am personal secretary to Jayapata Maharaj and Banu Maharaj.
Oh, that's major service.
And then I'm a secretary for the whole southern India, which consists of 6 states.
That's a major service. Do you speak to Jayapataka Swami sometimes?
We more or less converse in a week, once in a week.
So I have a message for him.
Yeah, you can send me by email, or if it is confidential, I can.
No, and not confidential. I mean, we're old friends for a long, long time. But he told me he wants to set an exhibit up in the Bhajan Kutir at Mayapur about perfect questions, perfect answers.
Okay. So what is the message I have to convey to him?
Well, tell him what's the next step.
Okay. Can you put a one-word email? I'll ensure that
I'll
email
send
he
you an
replies.
email. I'll
just
send you an email.
Write to him and make me a receiver. I'll ensure that
Okay.
he replies to you.
Very good. I'll put some details down,
Yes.
and I'll do that. So that's nice. You're his secretary. How is his health now?
Much better after the operations.
Yeah,
and he's attending nowadays some 5-6 meetings and 6-7 classes, and he's back into his full
and he's
He is very pale. नहीं खाना बस बात ड्राई फ्रूट ले लो कैश्यू ले लो आलमंड ले लो
he's the miracle person. Nobody can imagine what he does. It's almost unimaginable what he does. Okay, I'll send you a note, and then you can ask him. I'll explain everything in the note.
Yeah, you mark him his email. I don't know what is the email ID used for him. 2-3 email
I use
IDs.
jaipataka@gmail.com.
No. I will send you a right email ID. That is not the right email.
Send me the right one then. Okay. I saw him last year when he came to America. We spent a few hours together.
Yeah, I saw you at 40 devotees in 40 Prabhupada disciples, something around. I think that is the
incident. And we had a nice talk together. I took Harikesh to see him.
Yes.
You know, Harikesh is a good friend of mine, so we went out to see him. And of course, I'm the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute here, so we do a lot of things on the TOVP. So,
you do which part? Astronomical part or some other part?
A science part, some astronomy and some other things.
So I'm a vivid reader of Surya Siddhanta. I have finished reading different versions of Surya Siddhanta, and I did all those mathematical calculations with Surya Siddhanta.
Well, if you know any scientists that are very good at Surya Siddhanta want to work with us, we're most interested. You know, we work with Antardweep and Kandadi and the whole committee. We're the science advisors to them.
Then, like GBC Bureau has a SPT, Strategic Planning Team.
Yeah.
I'm the convener of that team.
Okay. Very good. Very good. You have quite a few things to do. So let me see. We have 31 people on now. Should we begin?
Yes. I thought of introducing you to everybody so that I don't want to miss the introduction. That's what I was.
Okay, we can wait a little bit. This is so you got quite a bit of service. Where are you from?
I'm basically from the southern tip of India, but right now I am a vice president of this temple for the past 2 years, because myself and the presidents are very close friends for past 15 years. So he requested me. I came here, just sitting here and doing my services, all other services.
Excellent. And I appreciate you in inviting me here. This is a rare treat. Let me see. If you see me looking away, I have 2 screens. So I have my notes on a second screen. Okay, I'm looking at the instructions you sent me.
Sumantha Bro, in YouTube, how many have joined?
Excuse me?
No. I'm asking my coordinator.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. 14 devotees are there on YouTube right now.
Shall we start?
Sure, Prabhu. 35 here, 14 there. We can start.
Okay. So this is a very, very great fortune for us. I never even thought in my life that I'll be able to speak to the person who was part of this perfect questions and perfect answers, because that was a book which brought me into Krishna consciousness. And many of you would have one of those, that would be the first books which you read and able to relate to Iskcon. So I got two books. One was Life Comes from Life. Another is this Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers. And Life Comes from Life, it is completely confusing and it takes away. So then the soothing comes from this Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers. It soothes you a lot. I don't know how many times I initially read it. I would have read maybe 5-6 times the same book. So I never thought in my life that I'll be able to speak to Prabhuji, who was destined by Krishna to speak to Prabhupada and bring us such a wonderful book, that I'll be speaking to that person. I never thought that. And you're also going to speak to that person and hear from them. It is the greatest opportunity at least I feel in my life. I hope you're also feeling like that. So let us hear from Prabhuji, how Krishna destined him to be there, and how comes such a conversation which brought such a wonderful book, which made so many devotees and which is making so many devotees. And then we should be very grateful for Prabhuji and Gandharvika Giridhari, by whose blessings we are here. And let us all pray for the well-being of Prabhu, because he has taken a lot of strain to associate with us. The time he goes to sleep will be past midnight. So I don't know why suddenly he decided to shower mercy on us, few people sitting here in one corner of India. So let us all be very, very grateful for him and chant Hare Krishna in our mind. One time praying to our dear deities Gandharvika Giridhari. And I hope so, we'll be able to understand Prabhupada through him. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
And if you have trouble hearing me, let me know.
Yeah.
As I've explained, that I have we had a storm and there's some internet difficulties. So my voice and my picture may be out of sync. But I will do the best I can. And if it doesn't work, please let me know right away. First, it's a great honor to be there. The last time I was in Bangalore was 1996. I was touring India with the president of the Graduate Theological Union. We were setting up some program, and I was on the way to the science conference of Sri Damodar Maharaj in Calcutta, and I ended up visiting Bangalore. So it was a very pleasant visit. Bangalore used to be the air-conditioned city, they used to call it, but by the time it came to the mid-90s, it became the polluted city, but that's Kali Yuga. Now the whole planet is entirely polluted with a COVID virus, and we can understand that we might think we're very, very powerful, but we're very insignificant, that a tiny little virus could stop the whole world. A virus you can only see with a very, very powerful microscope. So with that, I hope all of you are staying safe and well. It's a big honor to be in like I said, in Bangalore, and it's a lot easier to come there by Zoom than by airplane. So, I want to leave a lot of time for questions. If I seem a little tired, that's because it's very late at night here. But we'll go on. When I'll first offer some prayers. Om Jnana Pyamyasa Jnana Jnana Chakshumitamya Tajmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Let me see. I just want to change my. Okay. When I was 10 years old, I made a decision. I said, I am going to go to India. I don't know why. I do know why. Because it became clear when I went to India that I had been there a prior life. It became very obvious to me. I made a decision I wanted to go to India. Then when I was in college in the 1960s, I read the Bhagavad Gita, not Prabhupada's, it hadn't even been published. I read Dr. Radhakrishnan's Gita, and then I also read Franklin Edgerton's Gita. Dr. Radhakrishna said, Krishna is not Krishna. He's the ineffable one within all of us. I didn't believe him. Franklin Edgerton said, Tat Twam Asi, thou art that. I wrote a paper on it for my professor in college. He gave me an A, and I said, but that doesn't tell me what I want to know. And then I was in New York around 1968, and I saw the devotees chanting on the street. It was Jayadvaita Swami, I'm pretty sure, and other devotees. And in those days, the brahmacharis had a particular unique way. It was impossible for one brahmachari to have two socks that were the same color. It was almost as if it was the rule of the temple that the socks had to be different colors. And so the devotees were very odd looking to me. And I thought, these are people who are either transcendental or they're big exhibitionists, show-offs. They want, because at that time in Greenwich Village in New York, there were many, many hippies. And the dress and the behavior was unusual, to say the least. I wasn't much of a hippie. I was a student. But I saw them. I was just in high school, and I was quite amazed. I was in college then. I was quite amazed. And I heard the chanting. And then after I left, and many of you have had the same experience, something happened to me. I couldn't get the mantra out of my brain. It got stuck there. Just like when you hear a song, like mundane people will hear a Bollywood song, and they'll be singing it all day, some Bollywood song. And as a story aside, one time I was with Lata Mangeshkar. You know her? You know Lata Mangeshkar? Famous singer. And she was my guest in Houston. This was 1976. And because she was the most famous singer of her time. And she, I was visiting with her. I was bringing her prasadam. She wanted devotees to bring her prasadam. And I said to her, so why do you do all this singing? She says, I don't like all this Bollywood singing. I do it because it's my duty, but all I care about is bhajan. Anyway, that's a side story. So when I heard the Maha Mantra, it stuck in my brain. And the devotee said, chant and your life will be sublime. So I said, I don't know what sublime means, but I'll chant. And so I went to try to find the devotees. So I went to 26 2nd Avenue. It took me a long time to find out where they are because there was no internet or Google then. So then I found out somehow they were at 26 2nd Avenue. So I went to that place, but they had moved to 61 2nd Avenue. And at that time, the devotees never posted a sign where they moved. So it took me another months to find out where they moved. Finally, I ran into some devotees in New York. I said, where are you? And they told me their address. So I went to that place, my next trip to New York. And they'd again moved without putting a sign where they moved. So it took me about a year to find them. And then I walked in the temple. This was at 439 Henry Street in Brooklyn. and there was this overwhelming smell of incense and people in strange clothes. And I said, well, I'm going to find out if this Hare Krishna mantra, what it's about. And I asked for a book. So there was only one book they had in the temple then. So they gave me the one book. It was Nectar of Devotion. I challenge any of you to make that your first book. Now, Bhakti Charu Swami, that was his first book. His friend gave him Nectar of Devotion, 1970, end of 76. And when he read that book, immediately he understood that he had found his master. But he was already so advanced. He already understood so much. And as soon as he saw that book, he became completely overjoyed. And then he ended up meeting Prabhupada in Prayag, which was exactly where Rupa Goswami wrote the book. So that was quite mystical. But me, I got Nectar of Devotion. I said, this is so good. This will tell me what this is about. And I took it home, and the book smelled like incense for months. So I started reading the book, and I couldn't figure out if I was holding the book right side up or upside down, because it's quite an advanced book. And Prabhupada was very cleverly wanted the devotees to challenge the devotees, but they already knew the philosophy, some of the basic philosophy. I knew nothing. So then I made a decision. I said, I will not understand if Krishna consciousness is a legitimate religion or something made up unless I go to India. And I want to go to India since I was a little boy. Now, in those days, every week, this is by 1969, let's say, every week there was some guru coming from India. Prabhupada was the first significant one to come. But afterwards, there were so many gurus coming from India. And the one newspaper in New York, that was their joke every week. They take a picture of the latest guru who came. And of course, they all said they were God. One guru came, he was only 14 years old, came from Hardwar, and he said, I am God, I am Krishna. And every week somebody like that came. So I wanted to know, how do I know if this Krishna is the real religion of India, the real religion of the Bhagavad Gita, because I'd read the Gita, I was amazed by it, or was something made up. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to India. So I applied to a program called the Peace Corps, in which it's a government program. It's very hard to get in, but if you get in, then they'll send you to an overseas country, and you can then be a teacher or do some seva, some assistance overseas. So I got in and they asked me what country I wanted. I said India. If they said any other country, I would have said no. And when they said India, it turns out that India was the least desirable country. They were in maybe 100 countries. It was the least desirable because very austere. By 1971 when I went, very, very austere. And because when I said India, they said, great, you can have India, because no one wanted India hardly. So the next thing I knew, I was graduated college and I was on a plane on a way to India. I landed in New Delhi, and I said, now I'll find out what's going on. And I took Hindi training. Hum kuch Hindi jante hai. I took Hindi training in New Delhi. And my third week in India, my trainers sent me, all of us, there was maybe 100 of us getting trained to go to different places in India. And they said, okay, we want you to take the Hindi, you learn, buy a train ticket or bus ticket, go to a city, check it out, stay overnight, and come back alive, just to practice if we could be on our own. So they sent me to a town of Tanasur. I took a bus. I didn't know what Tanasur was. Tanasur is the bus station for the town of Kurukshetra. So I get off the bus, and there's a giant chariot temple still there. And I said, oh, this is the place where the Gita was spoken. I was so excited. I said, now I'll find out if this Krishna business is real or just made up. So I went to the University of Kurukshetra to check it out. I was surrounded by students because the only people, Americans, that ever showed up there were hippies. I didn't look like a hippie, so they were very interested to talk to me. And they took me to the student center. They were treating me real nice. And I said to them, tell me, do you chant Hare Krishna? Is this legitimate, or is this one of these phony gurus that come to America all the time? And they said, Krishna, remember, this is Kurukshetra. Krishna, we don't want to talk about Krishna. We want to talk about Nixon. India and Pakistan were about to go to war. They went to war maybe 6 months later, the Bangladesh war. And so they wanted to talk politics, and I wanted to talk Krishna. So that didn't work very well. So then the Peace Corps assigned me to the most modern, progressive, least political, best-run state in all of India. They assigned me to Bihar. Okay, that was a joke. And I hope there's no Biharis listening who are insulted. But it was the right place for me to go. So they sent me to Bihar. And then in Bihar, they sent me to the most backward place in Bihar. It was good because Krishna arranged that I wouldn't get too attached to the India scene. And I was in the south of Bihar, which is now Jharkhand state, and in a small town, Chaibasa. And I used to take the overnight train to Calcutta. Now, my pay was only a few hundred rupees a month, very, very low pay, because we were supposed to get similar pay to Indian teachers, but they had miscalculated, so we didn't even get that much pay. But to go to Calcutta was easy. It was a few rupees in the overnight train. And when I was in Calcutta one time, I saw a sign, Hare Krishna Festival. So I said, wow, Hare Krishna Festival. This sounds interesting. Now I'll find out if this Krishna thing is just made up or real. I am a scientist. I have degrees in science, so I look at things scientifically. I wanted to understand what this was about. So I went, they were having a big pandal at a very wealthy part of Calcutta. So I went to the pandal, and there was Giriraj, then Brahmachari, speaking. A brilliant, brilliant talk. I still remember it. And I was so impressed. I said, this is really interesting. First time I'd been in India, been there 6 months, that I heard anybody say anything philosophically intelligent. I used to go to the Hindu temples and the Christian churches and the mosques, and I'd ask people, tell me what your religious experience is. You're in this mystical place of India. What have you learned? And it was really not very good. It was like a big Amazon.com. You all know Amazon, or you have the Indian equivalent also. But I think Amazon's in India. Because people would go to the temple, the mosque, and they would say some prayers, maybe cut off their hair, leave gold, do something, give some offering, and the next day they'd want a package delivered to their house, just like Amazon does. I've done my punya. I've done my pious activities. Now I want my return. And that's business. And I didn't go all the way to India, get what we used to call then Delhi belly and all these problems. And I lived very, very austere, hardly any electricity, not running water. You know, I come from the West. I wasn't used to that, but very austere and just to do business with God. So when I heard Giriraj Brahmachari then speak, it was so brilliant. So then I found out where the temple was in Calcutta, same place as it is now. And I started, whenever I was in Calcutta, I would go visit the temple. And then one time I was there in November 1971, and Prabhupada was there. So I got to meet Prabhupada very briefly. And Prabhupada said, so you have a question? I said, yes, you are a Hindu. Why aren't you following the Buddhist path? So Prabhupada said to me, so what does the Buddha say? I said, well, there are 8-fold noble paths and 4 of these, or is it 4 of those and 8 of these? And finally I said, actually, I don't know what he said. So Prabhupada said, so why are you asking about Buddhism if you don't know what the Buddha says? Prabhupada wanted to talk philosophy, not Buddhism, Hinduism, some ism. He said, I'll talk philosophy. And I didn't know what the Buddha said, so after that I just kept my mouth shut and listened. So I went back to do my teaching assignment. I was assigned to a high school. And I was back in Calcutta in February 1972. And I ran into some devotees. And they said, we're doing food relief for the Bangladesh refugees. There's just been this huge war between India and Pakistan. The population of Calcutta, and within 2 weeks, doubled with all the refugees coming. It was a crazy time. And the Naxalites were there. They were blowing things up. It was an odd time. And the devotee said, we're doing food relief. I said, that's something I would like to do. So they told me how to get there. So I took a train to Navadvip, crossed the river. And when I got off the river, a devotee, Tejas, met me. And he had also been in the Peace Corps before I was. So he met me, and I told him I was a Peace Corps worker. And he said, oh, I used to be too. Now I'm a devotee. And we talked. He said, how would you like to meet Prabhupada? And I said, well, I met him once, but that would be lovely. So at Mayapur, there was one building, the Bhajan Kutir, thatch hut that Achyutananda had built. There was nothing else. And there was a tent for men, a tent for women, a pandal tent. So I went in to meet Prabhupada. And then I did something that I found that turned out to be very auspicious. Now, Krishna says in the Gita, just approach a spiritual master and inquire submissively. Because a self-realized soul, he can give you knowledge. So Krishna says, approach a spiritual master. So when I approached Prabhupada, I of course, met him briefly once, met his disciples, chanted Hare Krishna. I was impressed. I said, when I approach Prabhupada, I'm not going to challenge him. I'm going to inquire. I just want to know what the truth is. So I went in with the right attitude, and I was rendering service because I was helping with the food program. So just approach a spiritual master, number one, inquire submissively, render service. Quite by accident, I did what the Gita said. And so Prabhupada, also there were 70 devotees at Mayapur. This is the first festival. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had bought the land weeks before, maybe 1 month before. Prabhupada declared, we're going to do a festival for Gaur Purnima. So the devotees scrambled and arranged the festival, got a pandal tent, built a little hut for Prabhupada, but there was no facility. You could buy nothing but coconuts in Mayapur. One vendor had a few coconuts. There were no shops. There was nothing, just a tube well, you pump it for water. And there were 70 devotees, each devotee more enthusiastic to preach than the next. And there was only one guest at the whole festival. One guest. You can guess who that guest was. Me. I was the only guest. And everyone, almost everyone, was under 25 years old. They're all very young. When people are under 25, they get very, very enthusiastic. So enthusiastic that everyone wanted to preach to me. So Prabhupada kept me in the hut with him all day to protect me. That's my realization. He was just protecting me. So then I was sitting with Prabhupada, and when I was with him, then I'd leave and go do, my service, which was serving out khichdi to refugees or unlimited refugees. Then every 2-3 times a day, Prabhupada would call me. Somebody would come running. Prabhupada wants to see you. So I'd walk in and sit at his feet. And he'd say, so you have more questions? And we'd talk. So we did this for 3 days. I was very, very lucky. So now in Shama Sundar's book, he talks about when I met Prabhupada. So I'll read a little something. And Shama Sundar in this book here, he says, Prabhupada met with a few of his god brothers in his cottage each day, and with varying degrees of success, argued his case for a united worldwide preaching effort. I remember sitting there and seeing Prabhupada's god brothers come in. He was very respectful to them. Very, very, very respectful. He wouldn't sit when he was on the stage, he wouldn't sit in a chair unless each of them had a chair. He said things to his god brothers. I have started this. It is our Bhaktisiddhanta's wish. He's saying to his god brothers, now you join me and I will give you all facility. There was a lot of lip service, but no commitment from his god brothers. And then some of Prabhupada's god brothers objected. I saw this happen. They said Prabhupada's guru. They said Bhaktisiddhanta was Prabhupada. Now they're calling you Prabhupada. Why is that? And Prabhupada said, but my students have given me that name. What can I do? And Prabhupada took out his piece of stationery. And it said, Tridanda Goswami, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. It didn't say Prabhupada on it. He showed him the stationery. You see, I'm not calling myself Prabhupada. And he defeated all of his god brothers. They had to admit he gave a very good argument. And then I'm reading from Shama Sundar's book again. Each day, Bob Cohen, an American Peace Corps worker, visited Prabhupada in his room. Prabhupada met Swamiji, as Prabhupada was called, as Shama Sundar referred to him in those days, during the Deshapriya Pandal in Calcutta. Bob sat with Prabhupada in a humble mood and asked him more than 100 almost perfect spiritual questions, receiving perfect answers in return. Shama Sundar says, I sensed right away the special nature of their exchange and recorded the sessions. Unfortunately, the very first session I had with Prabhupada was not recorded. So the book begins in an odd place because the tape recorder was not on for the first hour. I wish it was, because Prabhupada asked the normal things, who are you, what do you do? The book begins a little bit abruptly because the first part wasn't recorded. Shama Sundar sensed the special nature and recorded all the sessions, except for the first, despite being very low on cassette tapes. After their last session, Shama Sundar said to Prabhupada, these discussions were perfect. Prabhupada replied, yes, you transcribe them. We shall print one book, perfect questions, perfect answers. So that's how the book came about. And of course, you've all seen the book. The book was a big shock to me. I mean, I never imagined such a thing would happen to me. It was like so strange. And then when I came back to America, I went to graduate school, and Jayadvaita Brahmachari then asked me if I could do the fidelity. They were going to make this book, Perfect Questions. Fidelity means listening to the tapes and checking it with the manuscript. So he handed me the manuscript, and I have the manuscript still that he handed me, and it was 108 pages. That's auspicious. I still have that. So then I'll talk a little bit about a mystical experience. Now, I'm a scientist, but mysticism always interested me, but I never thought I would have a mystical experience. But would you like me to share with you a mystical experience?
Yes, Professor.
If you would, I can share you one. I'll share you one. When I studied, this is quite mystical and quite strange. I still find this, what happened to me, so strange. I find it hard to believe, but it happened. When I was in college and I read Dr. Radhakrishnan's Gita, there was one verse in there. Now, I didn't know any Sanskrit at all, so only in English. And the one verse is from 930, Api chetu dacharo bhajat te man anyapak. If one commits the most abominable activity, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. And when I read that verse, I asked my professor John Kohler, I said, Professor Kohler, can you explain that verse to me? It mystifies me. But he didn't understand it. He said he didn't know. And that was the only verse in English I knew in the Gita. So I go and I'm sitting with Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada quotes to me one verse, and you can guess which verse he quoted. Apichetu dacharo. And he quotes it. He doesn't even say what it is in English. And he goes, have you read it? And I say, yes, the Sanskrit I don't know, but the English I do. And I say, even if the most evil man prays to me, he will be elevated, which is what I remembered. The very first verse Prabhupada quoted to me in Sanskrit was the only verse I knew in English from the Gita. Now, it gets even more mystical, because the very last verse Prabhupada quoted to me in our conversation, you can guess which verse it was. The very last verse he quoted was, Prabhupada says, a verse in the Bhagavatam says, if devotee is trying his best, but due to his incapability sometimes fail, Krishna excuses him. And in the Gita, Krishna says, Api chetu dacharo. Prabhupada quotes the same verse, so the very first verse and the last verse Prabhupada quoted to me was the only verse I ever knew from the Gita before I went to India. Now that, to me, is a mystical story. Now, the one who influenced me the most to be a devotee, besides Prabhupada, was the wonderful, wonderful Yamuna. Now, every day you hear Yamuna sing when the Govindam prayers, when we open the deities. Yamuna was one of the most wonderful people that had ever walked on this planet. She was a very powerful woman. She very strong-willed, very intelligent. She's, of course, published all these famous cookbooks that won the top awards. It was the first time ever a vegetarian cookbook. It ever won Cookbook of the Year award, and she won it. And Yamuna was so accomplished, so devoted. Prabhupada, one of Prabhupada's very first women disciples, and she was in Mayapur when I was there. So, after my second day, I believe, of conversations with Prabhupada, it was Gaur Purnima evening, and it was full moon, and I was standing outside, and Yamuna walked up to me, and she says, "You are very fortunate. You are so fortunate. Prabhupada is giving you all of his time, all of it. That doesn't happen." I mean, in the early days of the movement, Prabhupada, of course, gave everyone time, but by 1972, the movement was thousands of devotees. Prabhupada's giving you all his time. You are so lucky. And she had tears in her eyes. Tears, and it was glowing in the moonlight. And I said, "What do you mean, Yamuna?" She says, "You are so lucky. Prabhupada is giving you so much love, affection, attention." And she just offered me so much love that I got very scared. So I went behind the pandal tent, walked in the rice paddy field. It was dry, of course, that time of year. And I just collapsed and started crying. I said, "I came here to theoretically understand something. Because I'm a scientist. I want to understand it. Is Krishna God? And is this the real Gita? And does Hare Krishna really count?" But it was starting to get personal about me. It was no longer theoretical, and it scared me. So the next day, Prabhupada calls me in to see him. And Prabhupada says to me, we're talking, and I say to him, "Thank you very much. I have to leave tomorrow, to go back to my teaching." And Prabhupada says to me, because I was scared. I didn't want to be a devotee. I just wanted to learn something about Krishna. I thought if I'm a devotee, everything will be taken away from me. And it was just some illusion I had. So Prabhupada said, "Don't talk L-E-A-V-E, leave. Talk L-I-V-E, live." And he spelt it to me. And I says, "I was thinking now of returning to my town." And Prabhupada goes very sternly, "Don't return." I should stay here? Stay here. If you tell me to stay, I'll stay. Yes, you're a very good boy. And then Prabhupada, a long pause. When he said very good boy, sometimes you see someone walking their dog. Even, by the way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a dog named Tiger. But that's another story for another day. So when somebody's walking their dog, they'll say good boy to their dog. So when Prabhupada said good boy to me, I felt like I was his dog. So at that moment, I was no longer a theoretical visitor talking questions. Then it started becoming about me and how to be a devotee. And that was my major transformation, that exact moment. So after the conversation ended, I kept thinking about everything that was said. Now, as I said, there were 70 devotees, and every single devotee had some instruction for me. Now, some devotees had been in the movement 4 years, 5 years, that nobody longer. That was the most senior devotee possible. Maybe 6 years, that would be the maximum. Some devotees had been in the movement 6 days, but they all had shaved heads. I didn't know if somebody was senior, junior. So I made friends with Yadabar and Vishaka. Yadabar had also been in the Peace Corps. They were very nice to me. And of course, Yamuna offered me so much love. But everyone was so enthusiastic to preach, and they were preaching to me a lot. So one devotee is telling me, you must chant Hare Krishna. Another says you must offer your food, you must get up early in the morning, one devotee said you must never take any Western medicine that will kill you. And the next devotee came to me and said, I heard you have some aspirin, can I have some? And, it was like, I didn't know what was going on. And it was very confusing. So I went back. Eventually I left after the festival, went back to do my teaching, and I went back to Calcutta, and Prabhupada was there. So I went to see him. I was quite confused because somebody was saying you have to surrender everything. Somebody else saying you have to live in an ashram. And I was engaged to be married at that time. Of course, my wife, now I've been married 48 years. She's a wonderful devotee, but she didn't know anything about Krishna then because I was engaged before I went to India. So when I came back, boy, was she in for a surprise, but that's another story. And so I asked Prabhupada, what am I to do? Because there's so many different instructions. So Prabhupada told me then what the most important thing for me to do to really advance in Krishna consciousness. It wasn't necessarily getting up early, though he told me I should read the books every day. But he told me the most important instruction above all other instructions. So maybe you would like to hear that instruction because it's not in the book. So I'll tell it to you. But you have to listen very carefully. It's that important. The most important instruction Prabhupada gave me. This is the one instruction that I've always kept closest to my heart, that has always saved me through all the ups and downs we experience in devotional service. And that instruction is to always have good association. As simple as that. If I have good association, everything else comes automatically. Good association means, now I'm back to Rupa Goswami, in this case, the Upadeshamrita. Good association means people I can reveal my mind to, they can reveal my mind to me, people I feel comfortable with. Good association, I don't mean just hanging out. I mean really getting deep with people. And the key is, this is true for brahmacharis, grahastas, sannyasis, vanaprastha, for everybody. The key Prabhupada told me was make sure you always have good association. And in our movement, I've had some very good association and sometimes some not so good association. I've seen the craziest things possible in the movement. One of my services, by the way, is Iskcon Resolve. We do the conflict resolution, myself and Braja Bihari and others. We try to resolve conflicts, and I do a lot of that. And so, being the conflict resolver, we see the worst of the worst of the worst. But it never hurts my faith, not even for a moment, because Prabhupada gave me that instruction, and that instruction was, make sure I keep good associations. I have some very dear friends who I stay with. I have Ritavija Swami and Braja Bihari and Shanika Rishi at Oxford and Hridayananda Maharaj and Sachidananda Swami and Burajan and like this. So I have my own mentors and my friends. And so when I get bewildered, confused, I need words of wisdom, I have people I can go to. So that one instruction of Prabhupada is what has kept me able to always be faithful, no matter what craziness or may have happened in this material world or craziness that may happen in Iskcon. So, I have many other stories I can tell about meeting Prabhupada. I'll tell one more Prabhupada story because I was asked to, and then I will open this up for questions. Am I running on time, if you could tell me? Am I running on time? think so. Okay. Okay, good.
Murisha Babu, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. I was
You're doing fine, Prabhu. Carry on. You're doing fine.
Okay,
Please
I
carry
just
on
want to
with
make
the other
sure
story you have in mind. Carry on.
I'm on schedule with
Yes,
you.
yes.
Like respecting people's schedules. It's important. When I came back to New York, I was an unusual devotee because I was already engaged. Oh, somebody has to mute. Okay. I came back and I was in graduate school, but I was chanting 16 rounds, following, going to the temple, and running a bhakti yoga club on my campus. Devotees would stay with me, but it was very unusual for someone not to live in a temple. Now we're much more a community, but in those days everyone lived in the temple, and I lived outside. So people, and I wanted to wait until my wife was ready to get initiated, which she had never met devotees before. When I came back from India and I was mumbling on beads, she didn't know what that was. But I knew she was very sincere, very pious. So I took her to meet Prabhupada when he visited New York, and that's in the book, and that went very, very well. And then, so a few years later, of course, we did get initiated. But in the meantime, some devotees were wondering, in those days, after 6 months, everyone was always initiated. And it had already been 2 years since I met Prabhupada, and I wasn't initiated yet. So some devotees were wondering what's wrong with me. Some devotees were very nice to me. Gopal Krishna Maharaj now, Grahasta then, we became very good friends. I'd stay over at his house, and we'd have lunch together all the time. We're still friends, of course. And but some devotees weren't so mature, and they were preaching very heavy to me. What's wrong with you? Are you in Maya? You must be in Maya. You're not initiated yet. And your wife's uninitiated. Why don't you just leave your wife, move in the temple, become a brahmachari, blah, 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 blah. They're saying all these things. So I started thinking, maybe I am in Maya. Maybe I'm just a fool. Prabhupada's given me so much mercy. He's talked to me for 3 days, doesn't talk to everyone for 3 days. What's wrong with me? And then Prabhupada was visiting New York. And I actually got to pick him up at the airport. No, not that trip. That trip I didn't. The previous time he was in New York, I actually got to pick him up at the airport. I borrowed a relative's car. But this time, Prabhupada was there. I felt so fallen, so like I'm not qualified, and Prabhupada should not see my face any again. Because I wasn't initiated yet, and what's wrong with me? And some devotees weren't so expert and were telling me something's wrong with me. Not everyone, but just some. So then Prabhupada was walking from his room to the temple room, and I was in the hallway, crowded with devotees. So I offered obeisances before Prabhupada entered the hallway so he wouldn't see my face. And I put my head all the way on the ground in the corner so he wouldn't see me. And I said the prayers very slow, Namah, Om, Vishnu, Padaya, just very, very slow. So by the time I finished the prayers, Prabhupada would walk by me, be in the temple room, and I would just stick my head in the doorway. Somehow Prabhupada saw me, because I put my head in Dandavat on the ground before he entered, but somehow he knew it was me, and he stood there, waiting. And I said the prayer so slow, he had to wait some time, but he waited. And then when I stood up, Prabhupada was 1 inch from me. And he puts his arm around me, gives me a big hug. When Prabhupada usually didn't give big hugs, it was so strange. And he said, so glad to see you. That's all he said. And then at that moment, I knew, because in my heart, I knew I was doing the right thing, taking my time, trying to understand everything, waiting just for the right time. So Prabhupada, just that little gesture, I knew I was doing the right thing, in spite of some people saying maybe other things. So Krishna gave me a lot of mercy. Then finally, I'm getting initiated, 1976, New York Ratha Yatra, big time. I got initiated. Prabhupada didn't come to the ceremony because there were 100 people getting initiated and 100 bananas in the fire. Prabhupada wasn't feeling well then, and 100 bananas in one room. We didn't want Prabhupada in that room. And then the next day he goes to Guru Puja. And there was 2 or 3 times where Prabhupada gave me a little special attention like that hug. Other times, I won't go into that now. So I'm getting initiated. I'm now Bhramhatirtha. I go up to the Vyasasana at Guru Puja, get a cookie, and I think Prabhupada would be so glad to see me like he was the other times, because now I'm his disciple, and I was so proud. And I walk up, and I look right at Prabhupada to get the cookie, and he looks at me as if I'm an absolute piece of glass and doesn't see me. The most cleanest piece of glass you can imagine. He looked right through me as if I wasn't even there, because I was so proud at that moment. So Prabhupada smashed my pride. He could make me, he can appreciate my humility with a glance, and with the same glance, he could just smash my pride to smithereens. And then I saw Prabhupada for the last time, 1977. I saw him some other times, but I went to India for the Life Comes from Life conference run by Sri Damodar Maharaj. I was one of his scientists. I'll show you something in a moment. So I went to India, and Prabhupada was very ill. It was 1 month before he left us, and he was too sick to go to the conference, but every night he'd call us into his room, and he wanted to know our Sankirtan scores, because some big famous scientists came, plus 5 of us Prabhupada scientists. And by Sankirtan scores, what he wanted to know was what our arguments were and what their arguments were. So I'll show you. Can you see the picture? I think so.
Yes,
I think you
we are
can
able to
see
see
it.
the picture.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So I'm the one in the middle here, and that's Sariputta, and Madhava is now Madhavapuri, and Sri Damodar and Jnana. And that's in Vrindavan. So Prabhupada would call us in his room, and we'd give him his Sankirtan scores. And Prabhupada couldn't see very well. So we walked, because he was 1 month before he passed on, and he had to wear dark glasses, even though the room was dark, because the light hurt his eyes. So we went in the room, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj goes, "Your scientists are here, and they're wearing suits and ties." And Prabhupada goes, "Get them chairs." Of course, there weren't, in those days in Iskcon, we really had very few chairs. So 2 of us sat on 1 chair, and then 3 of us squatted down pretending we were sitting on chairs because Prabhupada couldn't see that well. What could we do? And then Prabhupada asked us what our arguments were and what their arguments were. And one last story. When I walked in the room, Atreya Rishi was, we flew together to Vrindavan, and so we, I think he was just made GBC then, of Iran. And we walked into the room, and when we walked in the room, Prabhupada, when we first got to Vrindavan, we went to see him, And he saw the shocked look on her face because Prabhupada was so super thin. He hadn't eaten in months due to his illness. And he was so thin. And the look on our face was shocked. And he turned to Atreya Rishi, and Prabhupada starts laughing and laughing. And he says, I've told you 1,000 times I'm not this body. I kept telling you I'm not this body. Now my body's gone. I'm just living in my bones. Do you finally believe me? And so Prabhupada made a whole joke of him just being sick. And anyway, so I'll stop here and try to answer any questions you have. I probably talked too much already, but I was asked to give some of the background story of Perfect Questions and how it happened and all of this, so I can answer any questions about me or Iskcon Resolve or Bhaktivedanta Institute or anything you like. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know. So I don't know, Murali Sham, I don't know how this works for people to ask questions. What's your method?
So first, our president wants to speak to you, Prabhu.
Radha Krishna, my respects to you.
Hare
Krishna.
Prabhu, please accept
I've heard very nice things about you, and I've heard you've stood up and protected Prabhupada's Iskcon and done many wonderful things. I'm very honored to meet you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, these are very kind words. I'm very grateful to you. Many years back in Mayapur, I had the greatest good fortune of having met you. I think at that time you were serving with the GBC in some capacity. And,
I was doing conflict resolution.
Yes, maybe. So we met up with each other, and you kind of startled me by asking me this question: do you know who I am? And then it was a fairly lengthy conversation. I'm sure you won't remember, but I remember quite a bit out of that conversation because I owe my spiritual life, or shall I say, the early solidification of my spiritual life was based on your big book, The Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. So I owe it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
go on.
I was pretty fascinated that in blood and flesh, I could meet you and have your darshan. And like you have done today, you were, I guess you were a lot, you were quite energetic even then. You were rattling off one pastime after another. And I was one of those new, young kids on the block trying to make major decisions in life. And then, after I met you, I kind of decided to join up full time. And here I am. I just want to say something.
Thank you.
That I owe it to you, Prabhu. So I want to say that not just that story you mentioned about Apichet Suduracharo, but actually your whole life of meeting Srila Prabhupada and subsequent events all have a mystical tinge about it. Everything that you have done, everything in your life, how the book came out and how it turned out to be such a phenomenally successful book. When I say successful in terms of increasing people's faith and enabling them to make decisions in their life. But my question to you is this. Well, it's been a long time now for all of you. The last time you met Prabhupada was a month before he passed away in 1977. That would be in October 1977. And first time you met him was, like you said, in 72. So that's like almost 45 plus years. Now, from the time you met Prabhupada first until now, how do you look at Prabhupada? You are so close to him. Now, in one sense, you're so distant from him, 45 years down the road. How do you look at Prabhupada? What does Prabhupada mean to you now?
Okay, that's a really intelligent question. I might add, some people are typing questions. I see it now. So everybody else just type your questions and I'll answer to the best of my ability. And when time is up, you just tell me time's up. But I'll answer to the best of my ability. I'll tell you one other story. I was at New Vrindavan last year for Satchidananda Swami's seminar. I love his seminars. And there's this one bhakta I'm sitting next to. And I'm getting to meet him. And he's one of the rare people. He's actually from the town where New Vrindavan is, because no local people ever join. And he joined. And I said to him, well, why did you join? And he said, well, I read this book, Perfect Questions, and it had a big impact on me. I said, oh, very good. We had been talking for a while. I said, have you ever met Bob Cohen? He goes, no, I've never met him. I said, are you sure? And he goes, no, I've never met him. And I go, are you absolutely sure? And he goes, no, I haven't met him. I said, I think you met him. And finally, he realized what happened. And every time I would see him, the rest of the time I was at New Vrindavan, he was just laughing and laughing. So it was kind of a funny thing happened that way. Anyway, I just like joking about this. So how do I feel? One thing is, there was a huge age difference between us and Prabhupada, and a big cultural difference. Prabhupada was externally a Bengali Vaishnav gentleman, and we were young American hippies or close to hippies, a huge cultural difference and age difference. And so Prabhupada was much funnier than I thought he was. He would joke a lot with us, but a lot of the times the jokes would just go right over our heads because we just didn't understand. And when I listen, even read Perfect Questions, and I can see how funny Prabhupada was. So I'll tell you a story about this that will help understand. Prabhupada was very human also, and I say that, and he was a personalist. And when we're personalists, we understand that we're persons. We have our own desires, our own individuality. In the Gita, Arjuna was first told that he was in Maya. He's acting cowardly. Get out of this concept that you're this body. But for most of the rest of the Gita, he was told to try to please understand your body. Understand you have a Kshatriya body, and you have a duty to do with it, to serve me. So in a similar way, when we become devotees, we first try to give up our bodily concept. We get a new name, we cut our hair off, we wear some different clothes. We try to get out of the bodily concept. But after that, we try to reconnect with our body and say, well, what kind of body do I have this life? So how can I use it best in service? So I'm a scholar, I'm good at sweeping, I'm a pujari, I'm a seamstress, whatever it is. How can I best use this body in Krishna's service? And so ultimately, we're personalists. And Prabhupada was, by every calculation, a personalist, which means he was a very nice person. And when I was with Prabhupada, I felt very comfortable. We look at him like awe and reverence, but I didn't come in that mood. Later on, of course, I did, but I came in that this is a saintly person who I want to learn from. And it was much easier for me to relate that way. Now, there's a story Bhakti Charu Swami tells about orange juice. You might know the story. He told it to me, and I've heard him repeat it other times. And Bhakti Charu Swami was the epitome of a gentleman. In many ways, he reminded me of Prabhupada because he was such a pukka gentleman in every regard, and very, very devotional and and just Krishna conscious from the very beginning. I mean, I knew him quite well. And the hardest class I ever gave in my life was last week speaking in Ujjain. But one time, Prabhupada asked Bhakti True Swami for a glass of orange juice, and he took so long to get it, because in India, you have to go to the market and find the oranges and squeeze them. And when he gave it to Prabhupada, Prabhupada goes, "That took too long," and he didn't want it. And Bhakti True Swami, being such a sensitive gentleman, was stunned. He couldn't move. He just stood there. Prabhupada said, "I don't want it." He just stood there, and he just walked up to Prabhupada and handed it to him anyway. So Prabhupada drank it. And then later on, he called Prabhupada, called him back with the bell, said, "Oh, don't worry. Old men get grouchy," something like that. Okay, my internet cut off for a moment, but I'm back now. And Jagadish told me the same story. He had the same adventure with Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was very much of a person. He was very loving, very concerned about his disciples. By 1976, there were so many, 1977, so many disciples that Prabhupada couldn't deal with everyone anymore like he did in the early days. I think I was the last devotee to join the movement that Prabhupada personally made a devotee. By the time I was around, Prabhupada had to deal with a layer of management between him and all the new people joining. He couldn't spend so much time. I just happened to be lucky to be the only one in Mayapur, the only guest in Mayapur. So as the years go on, I appreciate Prabhupada more and more for his scholarship, his devotion, and above all nowadays, I'm learning his practicality. Prabhupada was so practical. One of the most dangerous things in the movement is Prabhupada says, because Prabhupada taught us to deal with philosophically. We had hermeneutical way of dealing with things, meaning guru, shastra, and sadhu, how to understand things. Prabhupada wanted intelligent people join. He wanted us to think. He wanted us to question things. We don't question if Krishna is God, but we do question how he's God. For example, if Krishna said he's a taste of water, I don't doubt that. But how is Krishna the taste of water? What does that mean? Prabhupada wanted us to be thinkers, and so we can present to the intelligent class of people. So as the years and years go on, I look back, I'm amazed how practical Prabhupada was. We can find, sometimes he said on certain positions, he said this, and other times he said that, because Prabhupada was very practical. Rupa Goswami talks about in the 6th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says we have to distinguish between the principles of devotional service and the details. And sometimes as devotees, we get the principles and the details mixed up. The details are what I'm wearing, what I'm eating. Those are details. The principles are the overriding matters. We have to chant the holy name. We have to be loyal to the guru. Those are the principles. The details can vary in cultures all the time. Bhakti True Swami, though he was from Bengal, his favorite food, it turned out, was pizza. I remember one devotee coming back from India in 1973. I won't mention his name, but he came back with an Indian accent. He was only there for a few months because he thought, well, if Prabhupada had that accent, we should all have that accent. That's called imitating, not following. Following means we follow the instructions. We're not imitating. So what I learned over the years, all these years since Prabhupada left, is, and I keep having new and new realizations as I get good association, is I learn how to appreciate Prabhupada's practical matter. The biggest decision Prabhupada always would make is how can I present Krishna better? When Prabhupada had his first temple, there was seats in it. And he said, oh, we'll have seats. But then he realized that hippies like sitting on the floor, so he took out the seats. He wanted to do what was practical. Now, there were other questions in the chat, and when I got knocked off the internet, everything that was in the chat disappeared. I can't see it anymore. So if somebody can see any of those questions in the chat and send it back to me, I'll try my best to answer it. Because right now it's all blank in there. Or somebody can unmute and ask me a question. Here's a question. We would like to know, as a scientist, how did teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada churn your heart towards devotion to Krishna? Well, that's a very intelligent question. Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness very logically. And he used brilliant examples. Like one example he gave me is when you put an iron rod in fire, it's still an iron rod, but it assumes a quality of fire. So that's how devotional service works. So Prabhupada kept giving me very logical examples, and these examples appealed to my scientific training. So, and of course, the devotional side came because somebody has to mute. There's some noise in the background. Yeah. Being with Prabhupada and being with his devotees. I remember I was on the way home from India, and I stopped in Bombay, and I was visiting Juhu. And there were no buildings then. There were just the apartment buildings, but devotees had no buildings. They just bought the land, and there were tents on the roof, and devotees lived in the tents, so that's where I was staying. It was very, very austere. And I was watching Tulsi Puja at 4 in the morning on the roof of these buildings. And I was just watching, and Sarabi came up to me. He says, what are you doing? I said, I'm watching. I'm trying to understand this. He says, you'll never understand the taste of honey by licking the jar. You better go and try it out. So my internet cut off again, but I can still talk because I.
We are able to hear you, bro. You can continue.
Okay, here I am. So he said you have to participate. So I danced around Tulsi, and it became a mystical experience to me, a very, very mystical experience. I said, how can dancing around a plant do anything for one? I was just watching this. As a scientist, how can you dance around a plant? And it makes no sense to me. And then he said, stop licking the jar of honey. So when I walked around and danced around the plant, everything started making sense. So there were more questions, but again, it erased when I got knocked off the internet. While I'm waiting for more questions, I would love to visit Bangalore again someday. Krishna willing, and COVID goes away. I'd love to visit Bangalore. After you took initiation, I took 5 years to get. I took 5 years to get initiated. Was your advice to expedite or wait for a good time? Now, that is a very intelligent question. My advice is second initiation, you wait until you're ready. First, it's good to be anxious for initiation. We should all want to be initiated, but get initiated when you're ready. Get initiated when you're ready to stick to the process. Yeah, I can stick to this. Then you get initiated. If it takes 6 months or 6 years, it doesn't make a difference. But I was anxious to get initiated when I got initiated. By that time, I was very anxious. But I wanted to wait until my wife was ready. And then there was some other complication that came up. So I had to wait another 6 months. But it's good for first initiation to want it. I'd like to know about Srila Prabhupada's instruction on good association. Sometimes it's difficult due to our material engagements. Yes, I have friends who are non-devotees. I'm very active in my city. I ran the planning board. I'm an advisor to the chief of police. And I'm very friendly with these people. But I can't. This morning I was just meeting with the city manager who runs the whole city. He wanted to discuss some things about the city with me. And we're very friendly. But I can't really reveal my inner mind to him. I can't say to him, he knows I'm a devotee, but still I can't say to him, like he's wondering, what do we do about a particular issue with the police department? It's very controversial in America now. And I can't say to him, well, what would Krishna's will be? I can't say that to him. I have to say it differently because he's not a devotee. But when I'm with devotees, I can completely relax and we can discuss, okay, what is Krishna's will? Let's try to understand Krishna's desire. So I always make sure that whatever non-devotee association I have, I also keep some good devotee association so I can completely relax. Because I can never completely relax and be myself when I'm with non-devotees. Though I'm with non-devotees and I try to share with them what I can. I would like to know how you relate or differentiate scientific knowledge from that of Krishna conscious knowledge. No difference whatsoever. Krishna consciousness is very scientific. What's unscientific is to say that life comes from matter. We've never seen it happen. There's no evidence of it. We're all conscious. Even if we close our eyes, we can't even imagine being dead because we don't die. We're Satchitananda. So Krishna conscious is actually scientific. The problem is we don't present it very well at times. Prabhupada wanted us to present it scientifically with good evidence. One devotee, Varada Krishna, mentioned he joined the movement with Life Comes from Life and Perfect Questions, I think. Life Comes from Life has actually been withdrawn by the BBT. They no longer support that book because that book is not actually Prabhupada's words. They're going to reprint it. Turns out that the book was originally produced by Amsaduda in Germany, in German, and he did the translation, and he changed it a lot, so there was not more than hardly 5 words in there are exactly what Prabhupada said. There's a paper written on this, and the BBT agreed. And then it was translated from German back into English. So our Bhaktivedanta Institute will redo that book in the coming year, I hope. So, because people get the wrong impression that Prabhupada was always smashing these scientists, our foot in the face. That's not really, there's a little bit of that in the book when the scientists were trying to introduce philosophy that they didn't understand, such as life comes from matter, though there's no evidence for it. But Prabhupada, his first book was Easy Journey to Other Planets, and he appreciated scientists. He praised the scientists. He said there's a pinprick. They're missing something, and what they're missing is consciousness. The famous David Chalmers, the philosopher, said the hard problem of physics is what is consciousness. we did a conference last year, Bhaktivedanta Institute. We had 400 people came to the opening night. The mayor introduced it. Very famous scientists came. But most importantly, 50 devotee PhDs came. The first time we had that many devotee scientists together. And the name of the conference was Consciousness in Science. What is consciousness? Prabhupada's 1977 conference was called Life Comes from Life. The modern 2020 way to talk about life comes from life is what is consciousness. A lot of good work's done. Rasaraj Prabhu has done some good work. Some of Srup Damodar Maharaj's people in Calcutta have done good work. We're all trying to work on the same thing. So, any other questions? That's all I see in the chat session now. It's 2 minutes to midnight my time, and that means almost, I don't even know what time it is in India. I'm guessing 8:30 or 9 o'clock?
9:28.
Okay. Is there anything else, Prabhu, that I can do other than thank you all for tolerating me and listening to me and letting me rattle on a little bit here and there? But it's a big honor to be in Bangalore. I as you know, I love India in many ways, and I am wish I could be there again. I have a ticket to India in December to go to Govardhan for the retreat, but I don't think COVID's going to let go of us then. But the nice thing about COVID is the Yamuna River is blue again.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
On behalf of all the devotees here at the Sri Narsimha Giridhari Mandir, we would straight away like to tell you that if ever you were to come to Bangalore, it would be a pleasure to host you.
Thank you.
It would be, and don't worry, we won't. When you come here, we won't keep you awake till 12 midnight.
Oh, that's okay. As we say, the night is young. You know, and all of that. And I hope I didn't insult anybody, especially any Biharis among you.
No, we quite really relished everything you said. So,
okay.
Bangalore, I don't know if you've ever been here. Bangalore will be quite different from what it was since your last visit.
Yeah, I was there 25 years ago, 24 years ago. Yeah, it's the Silicon Valley of India. But I mean, I'd love to go to Bangalore. And traveling in India now, India is better and worse than it was. I mean, it's easy to get good water. My stomach doesn't bother me in India. There's airplanes everywhere. That's the good part. The bad part is there's pollution everywhere. There's bottles, the plastic bottles everywhere, and the Yamuna River is usually brown.
And Prabhu, there are devotees everywhere in Bangalore.
I like that.
Hundreds of devotees here. So you just said the importance of having good association.
Yeah.
So we look forward to the association that you can provide us. And I found this an extremely reassuring session in many ways. Your quiet faith and the convictions in Prabhupada and the process of bhakti, and the fact that even to this day you're active and you're speaking about getting out the next edition of the Life Come From Life, and the good work you're doing in Iskcon Resolve.
We have 5 books in progress right now from the Bhaktivedanta Institute. The BBT just authorized our next round of funding to produce these books. So we've been working. I revived the Bhaktivedanta Institute about 5 years ago. We're all a bunch of friends of Sadhaputta, because I was very, very close to Sadhaputta. And we got together and got all his books back in print. And then we decided, let's do more. And we formed this institute. And Prabhupada said in 75 in a letter, gather all the PhDs for the BI. So we did it. We had PhDs from India, Russia, Ukraine, Europe, South America, all over come. And we didn't realize there's so many brilliant PhDs now. When Prabhupada was alive, there was very few. So now we want to do something wonderful for Prabhupada.
So, like they say, the devotee never gives up, never dies. You're kind of a walking example of that. You're still having plans and ideas and vision.
Yeah.
Even that is extremely inspiring for us. So we pray to our beloved deities, Shri Gandharvika Giridhari, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Shri Nrsingadev, that you stay blessed, you stay healthy, you stay protected, and you're blessed with a long life and more success in your efforts to serve. And please, Srila Prabhupada and the Guru Parampara. Thank you very much, Prabhu. We are very, very grateful to you. We look forward to seeing you in December in India. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe things will get better and maybe you'll come by.
Yeah, it's so hard to predict. I'm still keeping my ticket, but who knows? Krishna has said, if you mess with Mother Bhumi, Bhumi will mess with you. Simple as that. And the world needed a pause. We were getting too frenetic, everyone too fast, too excited. In America, we got this crazy guy in Washington, and so Krishna, the pollution has gone down. We're getting rid of some crazy people, and hopefully the world will be a saner, more thoughtful place. But a lot of sadness, people dying. So many devotees have died from this disease, not just Bhakti True Swami. In England, devotees went to a funeral, and 6 or 8 of them got COVID, and 3 of them died. And it's just odd times, but it all makes us depend on Krishna more. So everything is ultimately for the good, even though it might seem very difficult. Next time I speak, I'll tell some stories about that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Have a great day. Hare Krishna.
You too. Hare Bol.
Dandavad.
Let us all chant Hare for the Hare Krishna Mahamantra for the benefit of Prabhuji. And we hope so. He gives us more association through Zoom and everything. Thanking from the heart for him. And we'll try to arrange more classes with him to get essence out of him. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna Krishna,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.